Good afternoon. It's the 4th of December 2012. It's just gone noon. Welcome to the UK Column Live. Afternoon, Bryant.
Good afternoon.
What's the weather doing?
Well, we can hear the weather because it's been hailing and raining so hard we can hear it on the window. So here in Plymouth, England, it's very, very cold today. It's raining, hailing heavily, overcast and pretty grim.
Indeed it is. We're going to start the show with yourself this morning.
We are. Well, we've picked out here one of my favourite politicians, which is Nick Clegg. He's, of course, the man that we very rarely see, but he's busy digging around in the background. And as I've pointed out before, in the Soviet-style administration, it's always the man who's number two that's the important one. And I think this is what's going on with the present administration. We're led to believe Cameron's in control, but in fact it's Nick Clegg. And of course, what's this man been doing? He's been fawning, or he's about to fawn to the European Union because he's going to go and award Nobel Peace Prizes. Cameron decided to turn the opportunity down. I think he got a bit squeamish because obviously he was in the spotlight over EU budgets, amongst other things. So poor little Nick Clegg was given the job to do. But if we have a look at a couple of the individuals that are going to receive this prize, just so that we know who has been looking after Europe, we've got here Barroso and Herman von Rompuy, and the other one is Martin Schulz. And according to this little ceremony, these are the three gentlemen who should be praised for their good work in doing what they've done to Europe. And perhaps it would be appropriate to say that, of course, what they've done to Europe is reduce it to an absolute mess. The euro is in a mess. Most of the European nations, with the exception of Germany, are in an absolute mess. Young people haven't got jobs, 50% unemployment. Spain beginning to fragment, rioting on the streets in Greece. And what does Nick Clegg do? He goes and rewards people for their efforts in creating it. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I think Greece, Spain, Ireland will disagree with these people being put forward. Really.
Well, we hope we can expose it for the sheer hypocrisy which it is. But of course, billions of pounds of UK money are going in the direction of these men, still unaccounted for. Of course, there hasn't been a police investigation.
No.
Going to switch to something a bit more light-hearted, but I think it makes a point. The Telegraph felt it very important to have a massive picture of Carol Vorderman's house with an article that she's up in arms because somewhere near her home in Bristol they're going to put in some additional pylons. And surprise, surprise, she's suddenly very concerned about the eyesore of the lines. She's also concerned about health risks from the pylons. Now, we might agree with her over some of these issues, so we wonder whether perhaps the fact that they're now arriving in her backyard, that she might be a little bit more forthcoming to help other people who are desperately trying to get the truth out about some of the dangers of these things. So we won't dwell on that too long, but a very nice house.
Yeah, small pad for just her.
I'm sure UK Column team can look forward to retiring in suitable palatial accommodation in due course. The BBC, of course, is busy doing what it does best. So at the moment, the BBC is really just a huge mouthpiece for the Hacked Off inquiry. The Hacked Off campaign. Bit of a Freudian slip again there. But the key article from the Telegraph here is that they've been having trouble with the BBC's revolving doors at their £1 billion BBC HQ. And I just thought we'd put this one up to emphasise the sorts of sums of money that the BBC is handling. And of course, at the moment, the BBC is simply not telling the truth about what's happening in Europe. It's not telling the truth about what's happening in Syria, for example, and Iran. And it's certainly not telling the truth about what's really been happening around the Leveson inquiry. The BBC has not mentioned Sir David Bell or Common Purpose once. That's what I'm led to believe. And of course, at the moment, the BBC is only giving interviews from individuals connected with the Media Standards Trust and the Hacked Off campaign. So revolving doors may be one thing, but certainly the BBC is not revolving on policy, it's simply going in one direction.
Yeah.
And this one you've picked up was a little bit of an interesting snippet.
Yes, well, Patrick Henningsen came on the radio show yesterday and was just going through some news stories, and he made the observation that Derek Lord, who is a political lobbyist, friend to the Conservatives, a member of the Conservative Club, Monday Club, and also he was the first Master of Foxhounds, Black Master of Foxhounds. His Wikipedia page has been edited. On the 26th of October, his wiki page read, Lord is a long-standing family friend of Samantha Cameron's family and a personal friend of David Cameron. He attended their wedding, and he has a wide circle of celebrity, political and business communities, but not anymore. It now says, all that's been deleted. All that's been deleted, that he's a close friend of the Camerons and that he attended their wedding. And it's just a bit interesting in light of what's happened with Mr McAlpine and others, Michael Portillo and others, that it's suddenly been removed.
Right, so what we're really saying is this is, what is this? I think maybe we'll keep an eye on it.
Exactly, yeah, we will do. Anybody
out there watching today who's got an interest in this gentleman or relationships with David Cameron's circle, magic circle, I think.
He was a close friend of Jimmy Savile's as well.
Right, okay. What's happening? Keep an eye on that one.
Yes, please.
Russia
today, yeah, I found this morning. A British website has been offering young women to strangers to cover the cost of their university and tuition fees. The Independent newspaper did a report on it, and in their finding they found women between 17 and 24 were offered to join this site to fund their university study, which wealthy businessmen seeking discreet adventures could then sponsor them to pay their tuition fees.
Right.
The website that I've tried to have a look at this morning is mysteriously not up anymore. It's been taken down. Apparently the website uses a false company and VAT identification number belonging to a legitimate dating website. There are arrangements there's over 1,500 students on this website offering their services, and looking for sponsorship in return for sex with businessmen.
Well, one of the things I think we can say is a little bit later, shortly, in fact, we're going to be looking at some other aspects of, how do we say, this is corruption of society, isn't it?
And it's what our
right.
kids are having to go through just to fund them's way through university.
Yeah, so here we've got where young people, presumably girls in general, are being targeted because at the moment the government's policy of charging huge amounts for education makes life for students more and more difficult. Now we've got people feeding on them, but we're not seeing any reaction from the government over this appearing, but as we'll see fairly shortly, apparently we are seeing different reactions.
Yeah, there's a grey area apparently in British law that's allowing the site to continue advertising.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see what reaction there is from the government on that one. We've chosen The Sun here with a good article which has got a wonderful picture of Mr Cameron, of course. Give watchdog teeth or get new press law, PM's threat to editors.
Yep.
So there's quite an interesting battle going on at the moment. Of course, The Sun and similar newspapers have absolutely not been squeaky clean. But what we're now seeing is, once again, David Cameron the threats are starting. So we say, actually, who is this man? Who is Cameron?
Well, I'll tell you what he's doing. He's demanding swift action on the Leveson's blueprint for an independent press regulators. He's going to be speaking to editors today. Last week, he had concerns about the report's call for laws to underpin the new watchdog. But the Culture Secretary, Maria Miller, was asked yesterday and about this, and she said, we will take action along the lines set out in the Leveson report if action is not taken, putting together a self-regulatory approach.
Yeah, so we come back on this theme at the moment that we've had the shock of the government going to legislate And then we're getting an easing back that, no, we're going to put something else in place. But of course, what is in the background is still Common Purpose's Media Standards Trust, which is still there working and pushing through hacked off. They are desperate to get control of the press. And why? Because the press are beginning to take a look at people like this. We just pop Mr. Cameron's face up so we can see it a bit more clearly. But of course, David Cameron is there threatening the press, but he was the man who withheld his own emails from the Leveson inquiry. So you set up an inquiry which is going to look at relationships with the press. That applies to everybody else apart from David Cameron and the circle of the elite. So these people are slowly but surely putting themselves above the law and outside of the glare of the press. I've actually got a slide of what you've just mentioned. This is the Mail article talking about the Prime Minister kill off Labour's move for a Leveson law. So this is the twist in what's going. Cameron they're trying to make out as the good guy because no, he doesn't want to legislate. But what they're really doing is sliding in control by some crony body. They're going to get it in one way or the other.
Funny how the UK column wasn't invited to his little meeting with editors.
Well, of course, you're not press. You can broadcast, you can be on the web or radio, such as yourself, or you can be printing, but you're not actually press unless you're part of the old boys club. But maybe we should write to the Prime Minister and ask whether we could be invited to his weekly briefing. Yeah. We'll keep you posted. Leveson advisors barred from discussing their opinions. I think you picked up on this, Mike.
This was in the Telegraph. Lord Justice Leveson's advisors are barred from discussing their opinions about the inquiry and their concerns about state regulation. And the implication here is that the Public Inquiries Act prevents assessors from discussing the contents of the report, of any inquiry report after the inquiry. But strangely enough, the Leveson inquiry said that Shami Chakrabarti was given more freedom to speak because of her role with Liberty. And so it does seem a bit strange that you have a law which says that assessors can't speak, but the inquiry itself then gives one particular assessor extra powers to speak. And what it seems to me is that really the other assessors are just hiding behind this. Leveson has run off to Australia. He isn't prepared to take any questions about the report. Clearly they're not prepared to discuss their role in the report, probably because of all the information that probably David Bell that is the main concern here. And the Telegraph is reporting one assessor as saying, I can't talk about it. If you look at the Public Inquiries Act, there are certain obligations on assessors. One of them is to keep details of the process private and let the report speak for itself. That's very similar language to the language that Leveson used, so I think they're hiding.
Well, there's a couple of key questions here. What is so special about Shami Chakrabarti? At the moment, of course, this woman can come onto the Olympics stage. I think she was carrying a flag or...
She was carrying a corner of the flag, yeah.
So who is this woman and what makes her so special? At the moment, she's being put forward as if she represents the whole of the British public. But in fact, she's involved with an organisation which I think many of the British public are very wary of. We mentioned yesterday the fact that in its earlier days, Liberty was helping to promote the agenda of people who were pro-paedophilia. And yet here is this woman who's being put forward now to be a spokesperson. Who is she? If anybody can shed some extra light on why this woman has got this tremendous power at the moment to say what should be happening in the press.
She's Common Purpose as well, isn't she?
Well, of course, she is Common Purpose. And on that subject, it's very interesting to note that Sir David Bell has now resigned from Common Purpose UK Limited. He still has involvement with Common Purpose as an organisation. But a matter of days after the Mail's exposure of the Common Purpose nexus, which helped to create the media scandal and Leveson, Sir David Bell pulls out, and of course Shami Chakrabarti who is another common purpose person, is pushed forward into the limelight to take the flak. It's control of the press by stealth. Care homes.
Yeah, care homes. Lots of advertisements went in for nurses, mental health nurses, and they were inviting people with criminal convictions to apply. The Daily Telegraph found this out. One chain of care homes had 35 separate adverts running last week, all pointing out that having a criminal record should not necessarily be a bar. The advertisements were for nursing posts with salaries at close to or around the minimum wage set. They were placed in Oxford, Chelmsford, Maidenhead, Liverpool, Dorset, Cornwall and across Scotland and Wales. The European Care Group, which are based in the West Midlands, had been criticised by inspectors in the past for failing to check the CRB, filling in the CRB forms, etc. And that's, it's our elderly, the most vulnerable people are going into care homes without proper checks being done. And it's pretty shocking. A spokeswoman have said, we now realise that this might be open to misinterpretation and will therefore not be including it in future adverts. But it's the fact that it's our most vulnerable people are being left with people who haven't had any background checks.
Yeah, and we could ask a question here, is this incompetence or is this deliberate? I think my view is actually that what we are seeing, this is a disturbing article in the Telegraph. I think it's there to disturb people, to make them frightened. But basically, we've got a doctrine running in the country which is destabilising.
And plus, there's so many elderly people now having to give up their homes. More and more are going into these care homes because they can't afford to have their care done at home because of the cost of it. They're being forced to sell their houses, and then they're being left at the hands of who knows who.
When they sell their homes, that takes money away from their families.
Yeah.
And of course, that money isn't there to pay for education or pay for the homes of future generations.
So their grandchildren have to go out and sell themselves to get themselves through university.
Sell themselves to get themselves through university. Yeah. I think that's absolutely correct, Mike.
I think this is also indicative of the state of society, in the sense that a couple of generations ago, families would have looked after their older generations themselves. It's the fact that economically people have been forced to move away from home in many cases, and there's so much more distance between people and their parents and the older generations, that's pushing people into care homes, and more of these care homes are simply profit centres and are nothing to do with care actually.
Right, and I think in saying that, we recognise that there are a lot of very good people out there working in establishments who are doing a good job. So,
but isn't it the same as the police? And there are these good people in these organisations, but as time moves on, you see the recruitment process starting to select the wrong type of people for these these jobs,
which is a deliberate agenda.
Yes.
And I think this is a subject which we will focus on because it's part of what is happening in the country. Is this an accidental breakdown we're seeing, or is it deliberate? Our view is it's deliberate. Rebecca Brooks here. This is a shot of the Hacked Off campaign and its offshoot, Hacked Inquiry. I've forgotten exactly what it is now. HackingInquiry.org. But basically, this is the offshoot of Sir David Bell and Julia Middleton's Media Standards Trust. Sets up Hacked Off. We're going to continue to focus on this organisation because at the moment this has now become the government's own propaganda machine. So Rebecca Brooks, of course, now in the dock, in the truest sense of the word. We're not seeing any of the politicians, we're not seeing Cameron, we're not seeing any of the other people actually being brought to book by their relationships with the press, certainly not the police at the moment. But if I just bring up this slide, somebody kindly sent us one of Miliband's tweets. And here he is, and of course he's saying exactly what it is. Please go to hackinginquiry.org. So that's the shot of Rebecca Brooks from their site. So here we've got Ed Miliband, who's now absolutely using Sir David Bell's and Julia Middleton's common purpose Media Standards Trust and the offshoot that hacked off. So it's blatant what's going on here, a cross-party agenda to take control of the press. And of course, once they do that, none of the key stories that are coming out into the public view are going to be seen. These people want to be operating in the dark, and then they can do what they like. This was an extraordinary story in The Independent, which I think you found, Louise, and I was absolutely delighted. What The Independent is crowing about is the Sun made illegal payments to a US serviceman to obtain the picture of Saddam. And there's an MP who we may know, Chris Bryant. He said here, Labour MP Chris Bryant told the House of Commons on Monday night that the Sun newspaper paid a substantial sum for the picture of the Iraqi dictator in his underpants while he was an American prisoner of war. Chris Bryant, of course, is another common purpose leader. He's been giving evidence at Leveson. He was running Common Purpose in London. So
he's published a book on the subject of
leadership, is he?
No, of press privacy and so on.
Oh, right, okay. So here he is with this phenomenal story that somebody paid a picture. So we thought we would just show you that Sun front page of Saddam Hussein in his underpants. A very demeaning picture, and we thought alongside of that it would be appropriate to put a picture of Chris Bryant MP. Saddam Hussein on the left, Chris Bryant on the right.
How much did you pay for that picture, Brian?
Which one? Chris Bryant?
Chris Bryant.
No, this is freely available on the internet, and this was Chris Bryant MP advertising himself on a gay website. But this is the unbelievable hypocrisy of these people at the moment. This is Chris Bryant MP who has been used to drive an attack on the press. I mean, we are allowed to laugh.
We are.
We're allowed to laugh, but of course this is so unbelievably serious that this is the state that this country's been reduced to. And it's been reduced to this condition deliberately by all three parties. But Chris Bryant MP, I think we're going to give you the UK Column Prize. We'll send you some Daz or Purcell to keep your Y fronts whiter than white. But we suggest you stand down from politics. While the press is laughing and making a mockery of the nation, of course, poor Syria is being ripped apart with the backing of David Cameron and William Hague. And the Express has picked up on the fact that the United Nations has now pulled out because of the deteriorating security conditions as fighting between the rebels and the government forces increases. So
they've destroyed Syria, so now let's get out of there, leave them to it.
There's a certain irony about this, isn't there, that basically the UN has not succeeded in pacifying things, and then when it gets really tough, they pull their staff out. But I think maybe what we should be emphasising is, of course, the BBC has absolutely stopped reporting on Syria. So the British government has been helping to undermine the regime of President Assad. And how many deaths are there in Syria at the moment? We've no idea. Meanwhile, we rely on Chris Bryant in his underpants to say what the press should and should not be reporting. George Osborne unveiling PFI reforms. We're only just putting this in as a short article just to emphasise the fact that what is actually going on day after day after day in UK is that our public infrastructure is being put into the control of private hands. And the moment that happens, of course, it is ultimately the banks who are in control. So each time one of these public finance initiative reforms is put through, what we're actually watching is our public assets, the property of the general public, simply being handed over to the banks, which leads us into economic matters. And I think you've got quite a few articles here which you
Right. So we're
flag
starting with Liam Halligan in the Telegraph. We've been talking about the what's the word? Insolvency of the banks for quite some time, and Liam Halligan is talking more or less about the same things. He's saying this weekend I'm feeling somewhat vindicated. More significantly, perhaps for the first time in quite a while, I'm rather hopeful. He's basically talking about the need for us to sort out the problems with the banks, that they need to raise more capital because they're effectively got a lot of bad debts on their books that they're not declaring. I mean, I think it's generally a good article, but the key point about it is that he's still focusing, as usual, as he is a financial man, he's still focusing on the financial aspect of it and not thinking about the economy as a whole. But what he does say at the end is the genuine cause of our economic torpor, meanwhile, is that banks aren't raising a new private sector capital needed to kickstart investment in commerce. Sorry about that. That is absolutely the wrong quote. Basically, he goes on to explain that banks should be restructured, as we've been talking about for quite some time, and then he goes on to call for Glass-Steagall splitting of the banks. And he's hoping that the successor in the Bank of England will support the calls for splitting the banks completely. But unfortunately, I don't believe that's going to happen because Mark Carney, who, as we know, is going to be the next governor of the Bank of England, has been attacking people who are pro splitting the banks. So I don't think that's going to happen. The next one is, again, a dash for gas in the next 30 years. 30 new by 2030, 30 new gas power plants by 2030, according to the Telegraph. Again, I reiterate that in 2 years' time, we have to start shutting down coal and oil-fired power stations. So that means for 15 years, we're going to have a shortfall in our energy generating capacity. They're talking, yes, Louise, yes?
Fracking, there's a lot of fracking going on around the country.
Well,
I do believe, for the natural gases, and there's a lot of protests going on about it as well.
Yes. Well, perhaps that's part of the agenda here. But my point here is that we are going to have a shortfall in our generating capacity for 15 years until we get these new power plants online. But in the meantime, we're still pushing stupid wind farms which aren't capable of replacing that generating capacity, even in the short term. So we've got Climate Change Minister, Greg Barker, coming out and telling us all how wonderful and majestic these wonderful and majestic wind farms are. I mean, does anybody in this room see them as wonderful and majestic?
No, I haven't actually seen very many working. They just stand there.
Well, that's a very interesting point, actually. If you just bring this slide up, Mike, because the Independent reported this morning that a report had come out which said the British economy would be £20 billion a year better off with a focus on wind power. And this is a Cambridge-based think tank who's come up with a report that's made this absolutely amazing claim. We actually spoke to them earlier this morning, and one of the key questions we said is who actually paid for your report? And the information we were given was that the report was commissioned by the World Wildlife Fund and Greenpeace. So it's very interesting when you dig into these things. The funders of this report were not mentioned at all in the Independent article that I saw. So why are these people funding these huge reports? And the gentleman who took the call was adamant that, of course, this was a totally independent report and its findings were correct. So, according to these people, we should be covering the country in windmills.
And so, while we're reducing our generating capacity, the Chambers of Commerce are again downgrading our growth forecast, their growth forecasts for the next couple of years. As naturally, when you've got a poor economy that can't afford to pay proper salaries and whatnot in this low quality jobs, you start moving towards slave labour. And really, we probably should have mentioned this yesterday because it was the first day of this new scheme. But basically, sick and disabled are now being pushed onto workfare and being forced to go to work for nothing, effectively.
Yeah, what I find incredible is that there are still people who feel they have to accept these programs coming through, that basically, because the government, because David Cameron, because one of the Tory cabinet has said that this is what's going to happen, people feel that they have to accept it, when my view is absolutely the opposite, that this is unfair and unreasonable, and what people should be doing is everything in their power to not accept it.
Indeed.
Otherwise, we are going to get more of this, which I think is the agenda.
Right. So what we mentioned in a previous program, I can't remember which day it was, but we did mention the fact that the government spending is not reducing, but they are still withdrawing benefits from more and more people.
Yep.
And these people are being pushed into effectively slave labour. Now, of course, the CBI, the Chamber of Commerce report saying that we're going to suffer economically, or at least they're downgrading their prediction for the British economy for the next few years. One of the key problems is the level of debt that countries are carrying. And I just wanted to highlight this because obviously the biggest economy in the world is still the United States, but it's also got the biggest debt burden, $16.3 trillion. And in fact, they have a limit on the amount of debt that they can ask for, and their debt ceiling is now only, according to Zero Hedge here, is now only $63 billion away. And so basically, just like the British government did during when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, they raided the public pension pot. We're now talking about the American government doing exactly the same thing. According to Zero Hedge, the Treasury will have no choice but to start raiding various government retirement funds until February or March next year, when they may be able to come to some agreement about raising the debt ceiling by a further several, $2 to $3, maybe more $1 trillion. And they're not dealing with the problem. They're not building an economy. They're just increasing the levels of debt that are being put on the taxpayer. And of course, this, we see this debt burden having to be paid for in increased taxes, for example. So here we've got a campaign here which is trying to reduce the cost of the cost of fuel. And what they've done is a poll showing how the cost of fuel is affecting people's daily lives. And the main statistic that I wanted to pull out of this, and it was picked up by a couple of the newspapers, is that there are now 6% of motorists saying that they sleep in their cars overnight rather than commute. And people that are having to commute ever greater distances to get to their jobs, they're trying to reduce the amount of money they have to spend on fuel by sleeping in their cars. That seems pretty horrendous. But of course, the British, we pay the most tax of anywhere in the world. And in fact, we're paying, according to RT, well, this was actually this was a report by the charity CARE. And they're saying that the British pay 73% of their income. 73% of our income goes in taxes of various kinds. And of course, as we know, we're taxed at multiple levels. We get taxed at source, at income. And then every time we pay for fuel, for example, we pay fuel duty, and then we pay VAT on top of the fuel duty. So we're paying tax upon tax upon tax. And the RT article here is comparing Ireland paying 64% of their incomes in tax. Germany, it's 40%. France, only 20%. So we're being ripped off. But in the meantime, as we've already highlighted, our tax money is going to fund groups like this. So finally, we've got admission in the mainstream media that Syrian rebel groups are absolutely working with groups linked to Al-Qaeda that are carrying out terrorist attacks, suicide bombings and whatnot. Our tax money is going to these people, directly or indirectly, it doesn't matter. Our tax money is going to these people. It is absolutely unconscionable that we should be supporting a government that's funneling money to people like this.
So putting the UN out of Syria and funding the rebels to leave it in the hands of these people.
Yeah, we are told we should be frightened of Al-Qaeda. Nobody has ever explained to us exactly who Al-Qaeda are. But we now know that whoever they are, the British government is helping to fund them in order to prosecute a war in Syria.
It's time to stop paying our tax.
It's absolutely. I'll just reinforce that with the Express here. It's got an interesting article because Al-Qaeda is being blamed for horrific abuses in Yemen. And this is Amnesty International warning about this. Now, I know Amnesty International has a fairly checkered political record, but nevertheless, we've got this constant theme coming through that Al-Qaeda is, on one hand, a threat to the West and Britain and America. On the other hand, in these countries overseas, the word coming in from on the ground is that it's Al-Qaeda doing the damage. And of course, Cameron and his cronies are supporting them. So, yeah, I think you're right, Mike. It's time that we actually started removing our support. And one of the ways we can do this is by not paying our taxes. We'll leave you to think about that. That brings us towards the end of the show. You've got an announcement about something.
I've got a couple of announcements, actually. The first one is Bill Maloney, Pie and Mash Films. They are in the process of making a new documentary, and they will hopefully be down here soon to join us and talk about that. Check out Pie and Mash's website, pieandmashfilms.com.
We've got a view of the website there if you just... Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm with yourself and Bill there.
Well, it's quite interesting that after we did the interview with Bill Maloney from the studio here in Plymouth, that he's had a lot of views and a lot more interest in what he's talking about. And I think we should also flag up today, of course, that it's gone remarkably quiet on the subject of paedophile rings, not only around the Jimmy Savile case, but of course with the links back into Parliament. So we're hearing a deafening silence at the moment over the likes, for example, of Cyril Smith, but also the other comments that Tom Watson has made. And the information that we are getting at the moment is that the establishment is absolutely shuddering because they know that slowly but surely the general public are waking up to the fact the paedophiles are in Westminster, are in the seats of high power, but they're doing their best at the moment to keep a lid on it. And of course the BBC utter silence on anything to do with child abuse at the moment. There's got to be a reason for it. It's a shame that picture isn't on this computer.
I know,
because,
it's a shame. Yeah.
Okay.
But on Sunday, anybody who is in the London area, there is an event going on. It is called On the Cusp, and it's an Ian Crane event. Brian will be speaking along with Ken O'Keefe, Patrick Henningsen and Ben Fellows, as well as Ian, obviously. It starts at 11 o'clock. It's at the Connaught Rooms in Great Queen Street in London. We'll all be going up for the event, and it starts at 11 a.m. and you can get tickets via ianrcrane.com.
Okay.
Yeah, details are on the UK Column website as well.
Okay, so have a look on the UK Column website, and also say at that event we're going to be taking an in-depth look at what has been going on around Leveson, Common Purpose, and what is now an absolutely blatant attempt by all three main political parties to get control of the press and media. If we allow them to do this, then of course all the rest of their dirty work is going to progress at a much faster pace. So if you're out there, if you've got friends who are in the BBC or working in major newspapers, start talking to them, start warning them, and let's see whether we can wake up people in Britain as to what's really going on. It's up to us. Okay, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.